Welcome, everyone, to the Nerd Journey podcast. Our goal is to help technical professionals accelerate their career progression, increase their job satisfaction, and bring you the advice we wish had been given earlier in our careers. I'm your host, John White, at VJourneyman on Twitter, joined by my co-host, Nick Corti, at NetworkNerd_.
We both work in the tech industry with backgrounds in IT operations and sales engineering. We hope our career discussions will be vendor neutral, relevant across disciplines, and remain timeless. If you're enjoying our content, please drop us a positive review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you subscribe. And if you want to get in touch with us, tweet or DM at Nerd Journey. Ultimately, we're just two nerds on a journey.
A journey to career enlightenment.
So let's take a trip.
We also wanted to mention that our second site, graph.nerd-journey.com, is also live. That's the knowledge graph and linked notes version of our main page's show notes that we developed to make it easier to explore our episodes, guests, and topics.
Here we are in episode 223. John, if I recall, you were telling us that you'd like to share some impressions of being a first-time manager. I feel like it's a good time. How about you?
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. If nothing else, it'd be like a pretty cool record later on for me to be able to go back and listen to. But I hope it's helpful for other people who are thinking about going into this line of work. I thought I knew what I was getting into, and, to a certain degree, I did, and to a certain degree, I didn't. So there's that.
Right. So this would be John's audio log of the first several weeks. I like it.
Yeah, I should say that as we're recording, I am in the middle of week 9 as a manager at Nutanix. It's been a whirlwind. It's been exciting, a lot of information, and really cool at the same time. So let's get into it.
Let's do it.
So first of all, I should note, kind of chronologically, onboarding. Onboarding as a manager was basically no different from onboarding as a individual contributor. Nutanix had a first week schedule for me. There was training that I went to that was basically the sales engineering training. So I was in the class with a bunch of individual contributor sales engineers, and we learned about the Nutanix technology stack and played with their hosted POC labs, proof of concept labs. Got to play with the actual products and tools and deploy them, mess around with them, break them, fix them.
That's the fun part, getting in there and tinkering with the products. I love it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it was the first time that I had ever done it. I knew, conceptually what it was all about, but it was fascinating to see. A little bit shocking, actually. They worked pretty hard to make it easy to use, and I could see that as a first-time user. So that was really cool. It was a cool experience. There's also the pilot of a new manager program that started, I would say, in week 5. That just happened to be when it was starting. I don't think that they were, specifically targeting running once a month or anything like that. It's a multi-week program. We meet once a week. There's homework between sessions, a lot of coaching about the job of being a manager and how it's different from being a tech lead on a team.
Are you doing the homework? That's the first thing I want to know.
Yeah. I'm actually doing the homework.
That's good. Make sure you turn that in on time.
It's funny. We actually had a conversation that mimicked one of the previous conversations that we had about, oh my goodness, I don't remember exactly what I called it, but like a user manual.
Operating manual for the self in the Kristen Carter episodes?
That's it. I believe that was episode 217, but Kristen Carter was 216 and 217. Well, they introduced a tool that very closely mirrored that tool. This is what I'm good at. This is how I effectively communicate. This is when I run into challenges. And they encourage us to kind of fill it out and then introduce it to our teams and have them, kind of go through the process of filling it out and sharing that with each other. It was really cool.
That's pretty neat.
Yeah. So I'm still in the middle of that process of going through that first-time manager program with a cohort of other first-time managers. Really enjoying that. It's a remote program, unfortunately, so we don't get to meet in person, but hopefully we can do things to maintain ourselves as a community and cohort of peer supporting first-time managers.
And would this be your peers within the country or even across the world?
I think it's in country. Yeah, because they've talked about piloting this program in other regions. So I'm pretty sure that it is in country. So that's like, I guess chronologically, the things that I'm running into about joining a new company. First of all, that, was a little bit not really as differentiated as, joining a company as an individual contributor. You onboard, you're studying the products that the company puts out, and you're meeting teammates, meeting your peers. And I guess one extra step as a manager is you're meeting the people who report to you. All of that got kind of jammed into the first week, and then, the managerial onboarding started a little bit later. So I had a good month of just handling that. So that's, I guess, kind of my first observations about joining in, was that there was good support to try to teach me some of the things that I would need. Couldn't all be jammed into the first week. I mean, that's unreasonable, especially the first-time manager stuff. I had done some studying ahead of time, so some of the things that they're teaching were things that I was already implementing, and some of them aren't. So that was, I'm getting useful information and tools out of it all the time.
Oh, that's good to hear. And you had not previously met members of the team that works for you within the process. I know we talked about that last week. It's not super normal for a potential manager to meet his or her direct reports in the interview process necessarily, or potential direct reports.
Yeah, it didn't happen for me, and now that I think about it, it hasn't happened where I've met a manager or a potential manager before they join a team. But that's my personal experience. So if that had happened, it would have been atypical in my experience, but I don't know if that's atypical in the world. My second observation about being a manager is the overhead of having a lot of meetings. As a manager, I started out with 30-minute one-on-one meetings with each of the people who reported to me, and found out that either through my inefficiency or whatever, I was running out of time. So I extended that to 45 minutes, which required a little bit of calendar shuffling, or a lot of calendar shuffling. But I have 9 reports, so that's 45 minutes times 9. I also have team meetings, like a team meeting, a weekly meeting with the entire team. And then I'm covering 2 different sales managers' teams. So I have all of their weekly team meetings to attend as well, with the extended sales team, the salespeople, along with the sales engineers, along with field marketing, channel sales managers, etc., etc. Every, specialist, sales, everybody who joins in or is invited to those meetings. Then I have my manager's meeting, right? The director that I report to. And she has a meeting with her team every other week. And then there's also a sales leadership team for the region. So that's the vice president of sales that the 2 regional directors of sales that I work with report to. That's another, I guess, bi-weekly or weekly meeting. And then I have forecast meetings with all of those teams as well, because we're a sales organization. And that all adds up to probably pushing 20 hours of meetings a week.
I'll add one more in there. You have a slot for a one-on-one with your boss directly, right?
Oh yeah, yeah, that's true. I completely forgot about that. Yeah, that's another meeting.
Whether it's 30 minutes or an hour or however frequent.
Absolutely. And then the thing that I've probably been slacking on is there's 2 people who offered to mentor me, and I have not put weekly 30-minute meetings with them on my calendar yet. But I should, because they're both really smart, observant, and experienced managers that I could probably be learning a lot from. So it's just me being neglectful and honestly not having the brain space to just add that meeting to my calendar. Juggling calendars is a little bit rough because I'm talking about two people who also have approximately that many hours of meetings and aren't necessarily in my time zone. And I should mention, or maybe I did or didn't, but one-on-one meetings with each of the sales directors that I partner with. So that's where 20 hours of meetings a week comes from. And it's a lot. It's a lot when I also need to have, take time to learn stuff, to have my actual deliverables. Like, I have a lot of outputs from each of those meetings, things that I need to get done and that I owe people. And so I have only half the week to actually do that. The other half of the week I'm in meetings. It's not something that I anticipated. I didn't really do the math on that.
Right. On how much time you'd actually be able to do stuff independently versus participate in other discussions.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think part of that might work out better with time. I might become more skilled and efficient with one-on-one meetings with my reports and learn to get the discussions that we need to have into 30 minutes instead of 45 minutes. But for right now, while I don't have the skill to do that, I cannot. Let me actually talk about that because, this is like another observation I think I've had is I had a very quick, sudden ramp up to an emotional investment in the success of the team and the individuals in the team. I know that as a manager of these people, I expected to be invested in their success, and I expected that to be, true intellectually, but I didn't realize how quickly that I would become emotionally invested in their successes as individuals and as a team. It's not something that I expected to happen or anticipated happening, and it happened very, very quickly.
Right, because you take ownership in the team and the people individually.
Yeah, as a partner, right? I think maybe I need to own the team culture and the team aspect of that, or at least be the guardian of it and the director, because the individuals are contributing to that, like the execution of that culture, just as much as I am, if not more so, because there's more of them. But it's the individual relationships that normally 9 weeks into knowing somebody and we get to meet, maybe an hour or two a week, that I wouldn't be as attached to their success and their careers as I have become. Their success has become just extremely important to me. I don't know, maybe I need to step back from that. I'm not sure.
Well, I think that's aligning with a sense of purpose and making an impact, and it brings you meaning. That's what I'm hearing.
That is true. It is like a strong sense of purpose. Like it's my primary job function, is their success as individuals and as a team. And I think that it has surprised me, again, like the emotional part of that. Intellectual part, of course, but the emotional part, being emotionally invested in them is surprising. I don't know what else to say other than it was surprising.
You can say you love your team, John. It's okay. You can say it on air.
We're, I can't say, hey, we're like the closest of friends at week 9, right? And I'm not even sure that good friends is a smart thing to even aim for, but emotionally invested in is something that happened right away, just very, very quickly.
There you go.
I don't know if I'm embarrassed by that or shocked, but I guess it just makes me feel vulnerable to say it out loud. But, these are like extremely competent, hardworking people who have a difficult, ambiguous task to do. And it is thrilling and infuriating at times to be in that job. And I just want them to all do really well and know that I have their backs. I don't know exactly how to tell them that except in those words. And, I have. And then it takes time for me to actually, back that up. Anybody can say words, right? It's the actions to back that up that matters. So I think that I don't know what else to say about that. It is just something that's happened, and it's something that I've observed, and it'll be interesting to see how that evolves over time and how it affects me over time. I think the next thing that I noticed was the reality of being one step removed from the business of helping to sell product. I say that, and it sounds like super obvious, but my job as a sales engineer was already one step removed from the actual sales process, right? I wasn't negotiating price. I wasn't, saying like, here's the discount that we can get you if you're at this volume. Like, how do I find out your process of signing for purchase orders? Like any of those types of things. It was already at the technical level.
Yeah, well, you're validating, is this going to work? Is this the right thing?
Exactly. So it was already technical validation of solutions. It was making suggestions. It was building technical relationships. But now I'm not doing that. I am helping a team of people who are actually doing that work. So it is rare when I will be called in to build and maintain a relationship. Again, intellectually, I knew that was going to happen, and the reality of it happening is a different experience than I expected.
So in that light, do you feel like you miss the fairly frequent customer interaction, or has your customer just changed?
I think the latter is true, and the former is also true. I miss the very specific type of customer interaction that you have as a sales engineer. And I also do have a new set of customers who are my reports. And to a certain degree, the upstream sales organization. It is something that still happens. I still go to events or meet customers or, ride along with the people who report to me, but it's them owning the relationships and me taking a back seat and being directed by them in those situations, right? They know what their customer needs from me, and they know what they need from me in front of their customer. I don't have the relationship. I don't have the insight. I don't have the context to be able to say, well, this is the right thing for me to say. This is the wrong thing for me to say. This is the right thing for me to ask. This is the wrong thing. So I have to rely on their insight to really, direct me in those interactions, and then kind of run with that. Now, I know, what the right thing to say, from the company standpoint is, what we should be doing, ethically, taking responsibility for the things that we do and not making promises that we can't keep and things like that. But, that's different from these people need to hear this message this way. And that kind of firsthand knowledge of how people react, it's rare that I'm in front of a customer where I'm the one who is important in the meeting. That probably shouldn't happen that often. But if I am in the meeting, it's still super important for me to have as much context as possible from the team who owns that relationship. And now my responsibility is not one or two sales territories. It's, it spans all of the sales territories across two sales regions. So there's no one customer that I'm going to be close with immediately. I might be asked to get close to a specific person at a specific customer if they need a message from a certain level, or they need to have a relationship at a certain level. They might ask me to do that, but they might not. It might happen, it might not happen. you know, again, in those situations, I'm one step removed, right? I'm there to deliver a message or to own a relationship, you know, for a period of time, and then slowly transition it back to the team that really owns that relationship in the long term. It's like I said, it's an interesting thing to intellectually know that that's going to happen, and a different thing to experience it, right?
Yeah.
To have so many sales territories that I am covering from a high level that I don't necessarily remember the particulars about more than a few of them. And not even the territories, it's more like a few customers.
This is the Matrix effect. No one can be told what the Matrix is, John. You have to see it for yourself. It's the same thing for trying to get all the information you can from people who've had kids. They can tell you all the stuff, but until you experience it, you don't 100% know. Just like we talked about before, until you do the job, you haven't lived it.
Yeah, it's very true.
And that's not a knock on anyone, but you're in the Matrix, which is awesome.
And I think, like we mentioned last week and the week before, I just remember what Don Jones said was your success is dependent upon other people, and you don't know if today was a good day or not, and you might not know for a while. Don said it, and now I'm living it, and it's a different experience. It's a different experience. I have some tactical things that I noticed too. Owning a team meeting agenda, for example, having productive and meaningful meetings that are adding value to people's week instead of, you know, just taking up time for the sake of taking up time. Having fruitful team discussions that are bringing important information to the forefront, and, you know, having people share their experiences and advice and things like that. Like, being able to run an effective meeting like that is a skill, and I'm not sure that I knew that it was. I mean, again, intellectually, I could have told you that it was, but the process of owning it every single week is different from, oh, hey, it's time for the team meeting. I'm showing up, and what are we talking about this week?
Right. That's another homework assignment.
Yeah, it is. Another tactical point of view, a tactical observation. We started performance reviews, and, you know, I'd written performance reviews for people before, and it is a different thing to have an entire team's performance reviews be your responsibility. It is daunting to realize that that is the case. And, you know, going into the process, I didn't know the criteria by which they were being evaluated, right? There should be some kind of objective criteria to say you're doing a good job at your job because you're meeting, you know, the following things, right? And I didn't know what those things were. I could tell you what the job was, but how do you evaluate whether somebody's doing the job well or not? You know, I knew the Google methodology for people to explain up the chain of command how they're doing, how they're contributing, but that's one company's vision. And so I had to go and search to understand what Nutanix's vision was and how they're evaluating sales engineers. And that was a journey, you know, of me finding that out. And it didn't happen the first week into performance review season. It happened like, I don't know, maybe a week and a half ago. You know, somebody's like, man, it would sure be great if we had, like, if we knew the criteria that we were being evaluated by. And I was like, man, that would be important for me to know too. Hold on.
And which ones map to the next job level?
Absolutely. Which of these behaviors or skills should you have? And then how are they, you know, what should they look like at, you know, the regular sales engineer? What should they look at, you know, at the senior and the, you know, senior +1 and senior +2? You know, all of those things are really important to know, because if somebody wants to be promoted, then they should be, you know, saying, here's all of the job skills that I have there that are at the next level up level, right? And I'm already doing performing that level of work. And so making sure that everybody had that information when I am like the person who's been at the company the least long time was daunting. Like, where do I go look? Like, my search of the intranet didn't turn up anything. Like, where else should I be going? And it took some, question asking for me to find all those things. And it ended up that I think it was a process that was changing. So I maybe that was why. But getting trained on it and then incorporating, those evaluation criteria into our kind of one-on-one sessions so that, we had at least one meeting every month where we're talking about those criteria and saying, checking in and saying like, hey, are you trying to move from, your current level to your current level +1 in this, job skill area? Like, what are you doing? Like, what can I do to help you? Like, if you aren't trying to move up, what are you trying to do? And again, as we discussed, it's fine to be in a place where you're like, hey, with my life the way it is, like all I can handle is kind of treading water and getting trained on new products and new advances in the current products. And, I can't also work on all these skills and I just need to tread water for a little while like that. I've been there. I was there last year when my daughter was born. I had all my brain space taken up by that. So, but finding out where each person is, making sure that I document that so I know that, consistently like checking in with each person so that what I think is, the position that they're in and what they think they told me or, what they're trying to tell me is like making sure that we're on the same page. And then now that we both understand that, what are we both doing about that? So if somebody says, well, my goal is to get promoted to the next level, how do we turn that into an actionable plan? And then can we incorporate that plan into our monthly one-on-one check-in, which is about career progress or just career? Because it doesn't have to be progress. It can just be about career.
Right. Yay for having career conversations with your manager. Episode 45.
I don't know if other people formalize that process. I think I just assumed that it was the case and didn't know exactly how things were done before and, just added that in. Maybe that was a small change that I made in the first 30 days, which maybe I should have waited on, but I just didn't think that I had the time to. And it ended up that I didn't because we had to do performance reviews. Another thing that's happened a little bit on a tactical basis is that I had a person resign and move to a different company, which was a really good thing for that person. And I tried to tell them, I was fully supportive of them and their move in their career and asked what I could do to help with that. And that was unexpected, but it is part of the job for me to hire people, right? So then I had to start a cycle of getting approval to hire somebody and then recruit for the position, do interviews, initial screening interviews, informational interviews, and then the formal interview process. And there ended up being like a little bit of pressure to hire somebody like quickly just because like we were passing a financial quarter boundary. And every time you do that, like, you're going to get budgets examined, right? So it's a little bit easier to remove funding for a position when nobody's hired in that position than it is if there's been an offer extended, to somebody. So I just couldn't, it was probably a 30-day gap between when I got my approval to hire somebody and when they were kind of looking for all positions to have an offer out. So I couldn't meet that boundary, but it was a little bit of added pressure that I hadn't anticipated was an issue. So it was kind of a little bit unnerving to know that, that could happen. The process of interviewing people when I'm the one responsible for the outcome and the performance of the person is a little bit different from being emotionally separate from their performance if that person is hired. So at Google, I did a lot of interviews with prospective sales engineers, customer engineers, they were called at Google. And, I was just kind of evaluating them. Do I think that they could do the job? Is that, are they talking in a way that makes sense to me as, a specific level of sales engineer, a specific seniority? Is that matching what they're saying? And so on and so forth. But it was different from this person is going to report to me and I'm going to oversee their progress and be held responsible ultimately if they were, if they don't pan out, and, that would probably be disastrous for them, as part of their careers to join the company and then find out that it just wasn't a good fit. Yeah, a little bit different than being, I guess, professionally detached from the interview process, which is probably why Google did it the way they did it. So people were professionally detached from evaluating the people.
So do you get to define the process steps as the manager, or was there something given to you from above, like this is the flow and number of rounds you need to use? I've always wondered how much flexibility there is in that, because I've heard different managers want different things in different ways.
I think there is a template of the way things are normally done. And then probably the manager has the ability to say, I'm going to bypass, this part or this part just because of time constraints or because the people and the role don't justify that specific step.
Or I want to add this step because it's needed for this role.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that makes sense.
So it's a slow process, and I did way more, I think, informational interviews than I thought that I would do. It's a role, the sales engineer is a role that people don't know about. So they see engineer and they see systems, because I think it's the official title is systems engineer, and they don't necessarily know what the role does. So you can read the description, and that's different from having somebody tell you what you're responsible for and why the role exists, right?
Sure.
Outside of already having done the job of or already being in a sales organization and understanding that role. So I did a lot of interviews that were just about that, and then kind of talking in general about the profile of person that I was looking for, which is, I think, probably pretty standard, either experience in the product or a product like it, a competitive product in the marketplace, or experience as a sales engineer, where you constantly have to learn about new products or new versions of products. And this is just a slightly heavier lift.
So you gave them the relatable experience requirements that you wanted. I like it.
Sure, yeah.
That just makes my heart happy. Like A+, John.
Well, it doesn't make sense to keep it a secret, right?
No.
And it also is the case like that every experienced sales engineer had their first job as a sales engineer, where they weren't an experienced sales engineer.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to be open to people who don't have experience as a sales engineer, right?
Yep.
It's an interesting position to be in. I just remember the people who first hired me and gave me a chance, in the role. The people who thought that I could do it, and the people who encouraged me to leave my operations job. I mean, there's just a long chain of people that got me here. And each of them, kind of took a look at me and said, oh yeah, you should move on to the next step. Heck, the hiring manager that hired me for this job, now I'm in somebody else's chain, right? Like
right.
As that, potentially the one to, hire them from, this SE position to a Nutanix SE position, or from an operational position into a Nutanix position as a sales engineer, or from like a competing product or an associated product to Nutanix as a sales engineer. And it's just, the potential impact on these people's lives.
Yeah.
That's daunting. Becoming like, now I know that I'm going to become emotionally invested in the person's success because that's something that's happened to me. So
Sure.
It's, another aspect to the hiring process. It's like evaluating. I probably should examine that, whether that makes sense, or if that's just a hindrance.
Well, I only have one piece of advice in this area. Don't try and start a podcast with those people, because you're going to run out of time eventually.
I mean, one of the things that I've realized is that I have to rely on multiple points of view. It can't just be my point of view. I can't be the only one evaluating them for everything. I have to put them through a process where I'm talking to them, but I have other people who are not me, with their backgrounds, not mine, their points of view, not mine, who can ask them questions which are not the questions that I'm asking them, and be able to give me a different point of view. That is pretty important. Just so, ultimately it's still, my responsibility to say, I think this is the person that we should hire, but to get other people's points of view and input into that decision, so that I know that, it's not solely me who has done the evaluation from beginning to end. That wouldn't make any sense. Well, what do you think, Nick? Do you think you want to become a manager someday?
I am currently undecided, but so far I'm like, I don't know. Let me go do that first thing you talked about and play with the technology. Like that's what got my attention.
Yeah, it's really cool to be able to play with the technology. That's always something that's fun to do.
Yeah, maybe someday. I mean, my wife keeps telling me that I'm like destined for it, but I'm like, I don't know. Maybe I'll go back to teaching math. Teaching
people math, isn't that a sales manager position? Not an SE manager?
Yeah, exactly. That's an interesting math.
That discount doesn't look right.
There's going to have to be some element of education in whatever I do, because there's something about that. It doesn't necessarily have to be me teaching all the time, but I love learning. So the teaching and the learning, they feed one another.
Yeah, I think it's supporting people in their learning journey is another aspect of it, right? Mm-hmm. People are always growing, and they have things that they need to do to support that growth, like, themselves, and they need help from other people to also support that growth. That's kind of a state that we're all in, and, ideally you have somebody, who is your manager who's supporting you there as well.
Yes, indeed.
I guess I need to probably get to a point where I know what growth that I should be looking for. I'm still not sure. I'm sure that there's any number of job skills that I need to work on, but I'm not quite sure what steps to take. And again, probably should invest in those peer one-on-ones.
Yeah, I think you'll learn real quick from those, from your boss, mix of the two.
Yeah.
And maybe feedback from the team.
Yeah, definitely. That's already helped immensely. Even just the idea of like, hey, what are the criteria that we're being evaluated by? Like, oh, geez. Yeah, that's a good idea. Maybe we can check in on this process periodically. I don't know how long it'll take for me to have a different opinion or to explain, that I'm at a different place in my growth cycle in this position. But I think maybe if we check in every 6 months or something like that, or at least, talk about doing a check-in every 6 months.
Yeah. And you know what? If you're listening to this and you have some feedback on how often you'd like to hear about John's progress, let's hear it. Tweet out to @NerdJourney or leave a comment on the website in the episode.
Yeah, and if you want to mentor me, I'm open to that too.
Now seeking mentors. There you go. All right. Well, until next time, it's me and Manager John. We'll see you later. Just a reminder, we'd like people to subscribe and give us a positive review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening. We want to know if we're being helpful and are always looking for interesting questions to ponder. We're collectively on Twitter @NerdJourney.
Farewell, listeners. Tune in next time as the journey continues. I'm John White @BJourneyman, for Nick Cordy @NetworkNerd_, signing off.
Adios.